Did that whore-ass cook taste this shit before he served it? Fuck me in the mouth. I wouldn't serve this slop to my goddamn dog. What on this menu won't make me throw up? Just some of the phrases uttered by Smokey Joe, a regular patron at the fine dining restaurant I was waiting at in North Hollywood. Now, Joe was 77 years old. He was crass, he was rude, he hated every dish put in front of him, yet he came to the restaurant twice a week, always wearing a suit, tie, and matching shoes from a closet that surely hadn't been updated since the 70s. That old guy is such a pimp, the busboys would marvel. And the owner would let him smoke at the bar after everyone else left, hence us dubbing him Smokey Joe. Now, I had managed to avoid his wrath and elite palate until one fateful night he was at last sat in my section. The owner was an old friend of his, and she led me to him like a lamb to slaughter. I approached his table for one, proceeded first to take his order, and then his typical verbal assault on the food. But I did not shrink away. And when he said, "This ribeye tastes like whore vomit," I intuitively called an audible on my Kill 'em with Kindness play and said, "Well, why don't you pretend it tastes like pussy and shut up?" We eyed each other in shocked silence, and I quickly walked away before anything bad happened. And the next time Joe came in, he asked for me to wait on him. And the next time, and the next time. I should mention that he left me a $100 tip, too, after that incident. I couldn't even drop off his check. I had to have some other server do it for me because I was too scared. But we established a reliable routine with all these visits. He would crab about the food, and I would crab about him. But in between our verbal battles, I began to ask him some questions. I did a lot of listening, and story by story, I began to see a man who was looking at the last years of what had been an extraordinary life. Joe was one of 8 born to a family of poor Armenian immigrants. He joined the Air Force at age 17 to fight during the Korean War. He became a self-made machinist and multimillionaire by the age 30, making parts for airplanes and space shuttles, until President Ronald Reagan, that no-good cocksucking born in a test tube motherless son of a fucking whore, had his business audited during the administration's war on defense contracts, and Smokey Joe became a federal felon. A fact that he's oddly proud of, although he viciously maintains his innocence. And although twice married with 5 children, Joe's greatest love affair had been with his 2 P-51 Mustang airplanes. And this is where a surprising connection was revealed. See, I have a grandfather who was obsessed with Mustangs as well, and made sure that me, his first grandchild, a My Pretty Pony, strawberry shortcake loving Teddy Ruxpin girl, had extensive knowledge of vintage fighter airplanes. So I randomly know all about the P-51, considered to be the best fighter plane of World War II. Hermann Göring said, "The day I saw the Mustangs over Berlin, I knew the jig was up." So my elementary years were dutifully spent following my grandfather around every air show in the Midwest, listening and absorbing his lessons and his stories. I learned that when he was 10, his father had given him $1 to take his first airplane ride in a tri-motor Ford, the only caveat being that he not tell his mom. With that ride, my grandpa was hooked. He told me that as a boy, he was constantly getting in trouble for doodling pictures of P-51s in his notebook and longed to join his brothers in World War II. When the Korean War called, though, so did his first child and a solid job working on the railroad. Air shows and Sunday outings, which was essentially packing the family into the car and driving to O'Hare Airport, parking as close to the runway as possible and watching the planes take off and land, real fun for my mom, was as close to the show as he got. And as of during this time when this was happening, my grandpa, he had 2 dreams in life. And one was to be the Godfather, and the second dream was to fly in a P-51 Mustang. And at 3 weeks shy of 80, he had accomplished neither. Because see, at some of these air shows, you can buy Mustang rides, but the ticket price was never in his budget. He had given his life to the railroad, and when he transferred from driving passenger in Chicago to freight up in Hayward, Wisconsin, just 1 year away from his retirement and full pension package, he quit because the idea of being away from my grandmother, his wife, 4 nights a week was unthinkable. This is a man who every morning while my grandma slept, he made a pot of coffee, cut her a grapefruit, laid out the funny section of the paper, and recorded a good morning message for her in this handheld recorder. They've been married for 63 years now. So, imagine Smokey Joe's shock when I casually mentioned that, duh, of course I know the P-51 was powered by the Packard 5 6057, a license-built version of the Rolls-Royce Merlin 60 series. I told him about my grandpa, the trips to air shows, his dream to fly in a Mustang, his approaching 80th birthday, and a recent pacemaker being his biggest present. Well, Smokey Joe loves presents, and he didn't think that a pacemaker fit the bill. So, one night, as he was leaving, he said, "Give me your hand." And he left in my palm $2,000 in neatly stacked $100 bills. And he said, "You fly your grandpa out here, you put him up at the Van Nuys Airport Hotel, and you tell him that he's gonna fly in a goddamn fucking P-51 Mustang. Don't wait." It turns out Joe had once owned and raced a few Mustangs and had recently sold his last one to Tom Cruise. With Tom's permission, Joe had arranged to borrow the plane back for one more joyride. I started crying and wondering if Oprah was hiding somewhere with her. My grandpa, who had not had a single day apart from my grandma in the last 18 years, checked with the doctor to make sure that his new heart could take the ride. He got the okay from the wife, we booked a ticket, and 10 days later, he arrived in LAX. No cell phone, a tiny little duffel bag, and a little wooden cross around his neck. It was supposed to rain on the big day, which is not good for flying. I called Joe to see if we'd still be able to go up. "Oh, fuck yeah, it's not gonna rain." I argued with him, but the weather person said that, and he interrupted me, "Fuck those motherless fucks, it ain't gonna rain." See you at 10. As it turned out, it actually was raining a little bit the next morning, but at 9:45 a.m., as magic, it stopped, and the sky became what Joe called perfect Mustang weather. A little after 10, we were all waiting there. We heard the rumble in the distance. It wasn't just the roar of any engine plane, it was of any airplane engine, it was the distinct hum of a Mustang. I looked at my grandpa, who looked at me, he told me he loved me, he tried to hide his tears from Joe. Matt, the pilot, touched down with the ease and nonchalance of a cab driver picking up his next customer. All three of us, it took all of us to help my grandpa into the converted 2-seater plane. And for the next 45 minutes, my grandpa, who Joe had now christened Big Jim, took the ride of his life. And I don't think I can say up until that moment that I had ever witnessed a lifelong dream coming true, but that's exactly what it was. When Grandpa landed, Joe walked up and yelled, "It's the most fucking fun you can have with your clothes on, huh?" And all my grandpa could say was, "Jenny, I want to go again." And as if that wasn't enough, Joe decided that after experiencing World War II aviation, his new friend might like something more modern. So the next day, we flew on a chartered Learjet to Vegas for lunch at the Paris. Joe taught us how to play craps, and my grandpa, who had never been to Vegas and who lives on a $700 a month pension, he won $1,200 when he hopped 10 the hard way. Which, it's really hard, it's like 3-to-1 odds. It says that on this roll only, you're gonna roll 2 5s. And that's exactly what he proceeded to roll, 2 5s. He had been worrying about what to buy my grandma for their upcoming 60th wedding anniversary, and 60s diamonds. But after he rolled that 10 with more tears in his eyes, he yelled, "I'm buying her diamond earrings and a necklace!" Mafia life, it was not, but it was sure close for him. A few months later, my grandpa suffered a stroke and was forever changed. But now his speech therapy consists almost solely of reconstructing the story of his weekend aboard the P-51 in Vegas with his new friend and hero, Joe. Every nurse, every therapist, every doctor has heard Big Jim's story a few times. When Tom Cruise bought the plane from Joe, he had rechristened it Kiss Me Kate, for Katie Holmes. It's painted over now. But the original name of the plane that Joe had given it was the Healer, and that it truly was.
Woo!